In this video, we'll make use of TypeScript accessors. So currently we have our customer class, we have our properties for first name and last name, and they're private. And what I'd like to do is figure out, well, how can I access that data? So since our properties are private, we need a way to access them. So we can create traditional methods as in other programming languages. So we can simply define getter and setter methods. So here's an example of creating getter-setter methods in TypeScript. So I simply define a getter method, getFirstName. So I have the method name, and I have the return type, and I return this dot firstName. And then I can do a similar thing for the setter method. So setFirstName, there's the method name, there's the param type, and then return type of void. And we simply assign it internally. And then I simply create an instance of my class, and then I set the data. So I say set first name, Greg, and then I retrieve first name by saying myCustomer.getFirstName. And a very traditional approach as far as using getters and setters, just like any other programming language. And you can do a similar thing here in TypeScript. But TypeScript also offers an alternate syntax that you can use. This idea of accessors. So you can define these special get-set methods known as accessors with a slightly different syntax. Alrighty, so in our customer class, the first thing I'll do is I'll change my internal property names. So for the internal property names, you can give any property name. Some TypeScript developers use the leading underscore, but there's nothing special about the leading underscore. There's no special magic. It's simply a convention. You could actually give your internal property names any name because they're private. And then I go ahead and set up a get accessor. So note the special syntax here, get space property. And then we do a similar thing for creating a set accessor. So again, note the syntax, set space property. And both of these accessors are public. So that's what they'll use to access this given data. And one thing to note about the set accessor, there's no return type, not even void. Alrighty, so these are the accessors. These are the public accessors that you'll use to access the given data. But now you access the data, it's a slightly different syntax here. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and use it. So we create our customer, and then I say myCustomer.firstName equals Susan. So this actually calls the set accessor. Since we're assigning a value, we're actually setting the given value. So behind the scenes, TypeScript will call this set accessor. And then a similar thing here when we try and retrieve the data or read the data. So myCustomer.firstName. So we're actually retrieving the data. So it's going to call the get accessor since we're actually accessing a value. So it'll do this behind the scenes. And in fact, in our customer class, we can actually give our internal property any name. If I wanted to, I could have these properties as X and Y. The outside code is not setting the internal private fields directly, only via these public accessors for get and set. So the public get set accessors are still called accordingly. Alrighty, so let's just go ahead and rename our fields to the original names from the previous slide. So just a little bit of refactoring here. So I put back the underscore first name and the underscore last name. And then also I'm going to remove public from the accessors because if no access modifier is given, then it's public by default. So I'm simply just kind of cleaning up my code a bit. Alrighty, so regarding compiler flags, the get set accessor feature is only supported in ES5 and higher. You have to manually set a compiler flag in order to compile the code. So when you do a TSC, you have to give --target ES5. If you don't provide this information, you'll actually get an error where the compiler will say, hey, this feature is only available in ES5 or higher. So you have to explicitly give this compiler flag. So you may have noticed that we have a lot of compiler flags. It's too much stuff to remember and it's really easy to forget. So wouldn't it be great to set this up in a configuration file? And the answer is yes, and TypeScript has a solution. They have a config file called tsconfig.json. So this tsconfig.json file defines compiler options and project settings. So you simply place this file in the root of your project directory. So here's a very simple tsconfig.json file. And in this config, we're simply setting some compiler options or compiler flags. So we set the no emit on error to true and target for ES5. And so if you don't want to manually create this file, you can also generate a template for this configuration. So in your directory, in your project, you simply say ts-init, and it'll generate a default tsconfig.json file. And then you simply edit the tsconfig.json file accordingly for your given project requirements. And then once your project has a tsconfig.json file, then you can compile it by simply giving the tsc command. And there's no need to give the names of your TypeScript files. By default, it'll compile all star.ts files. And there's additional configurations you can set for the tsconfig.json file. You can view the documentation to learn all of the details. Simply visit the link here, www.lovetocode.com/tsconfig.docs, and I'll redirect you to the official tsconfig documentation. Alrighty, so just to kind of wrap up here, so we're making use of accessors, the get set. So we have our fields that are private. We make use of these accessors, get space first name, set space first name, and then we make the assignments, and behind the scenes TypeScript will call the appropriate accessors for getting and setting the data. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and move into our IDE, and let's write the code here, and let's test it out. So I'll see ya in the next video.